This is a huge question that impacts a lot of entrepreneurs. Should you prioritize hiring talent, in other words, bringing people in from outside the organization as you grow, or developing talent internally as you grow as an organization? There's no black or white answer. It's always going to be nuanced and case by case, depending on the role, depending on the talent pool, depending on who you have internally, who's available externally, all that stuff. But every organization needs to have a certain number of clearly defined biases, because your biases ultimately become the basis of your culture. And so that's really the question. Should you be biased toward bringing in outside people or developing internal people? As a little bit of a setup here, I have an organization called Entre Institute. In addition to teaching people how to become entrepreneurs, we are trying to be the best students of our own teaching, because we have scaled a pretty large organization very quickly. And so let me use Entre as kind of a setup for why my thoughts are what they are. We have had a very good success rate at bringing in people from other organizations or from outside our organization that have really helped us level up as an organization. For example, we've hired people that previously worked at Coca-Cola, for example, Amazon, LinkedIn, BuzzFeed, Apple, like people leaving these, mega Fortune 500, Fortune 100 even organizations and coming here. And so I think you should actually prioritize bringing talent in from outside your organization, but you have to build very intentionally a specific type of organization that's going to make that possible, because essentially your value proposition to the market is going to be, hey, take what could be perceived as a step down or a step from a larger organization to a smaller organization. You have to have enough incentives and upsides for people to be wanting to do that at various stages in their career. And if you can create an organization where that's possible, and there's a lot of reasons you should, because it forces you to build a better organization in a lot of different ways, not just in terms of recruiting, but that absolutely should be your goal, and that should be your bias. I'm going to explain to you why. First, let me touch on a couple of the main variables that are going to determine whether or not that's actually doable for you as an organization. First of all is going to be your company culture. That's such a cheap buzzword that gets thrown around, but when you're trying to bring in great people, it's like everything, because usually one of the biggest reasons they would want to come from a larger organization to a smaller organization is because they want a stronger culture, or they want to feel like they can make more of a direct impact on the business. Also, company financial health. People that are by definition more talented or more experienced or more seasoned than the average within your organization are probably also going to be more expensive than typically the norm within your organization. And as you evolve, you can do salary benchmarking and create leveling guidelines and all this stuff that kind of be in the weeds, the HR weeds. But in general, company financial health is going to determine a lot whether or not you can get the best people, because they cost money. Also, the company mission, really, again, company buzz or cheap buzzwords that get thrown around, like we're a mission-driven company or whatever, but like, what is the mission of your company? And is it a mission that somebody coming from an outside organization is going to feel like literally the meaning of their life, the value of the work that they do is a step up, even if they, quote, step down into a smaller organization, because now the work matters more because of the significance of the mission. Like, how have you actually framed your product or service, your unique selling proposition to the market in a way that it actually is doing meaningful, impactful work that people are going to be excited to be aligned with? Also, for you as a founder or a CEO or a leader of an organization, your track record. I'll talk a little bit more about how you can sort of compensate if you don't have a track record. Who you are and what you've done in the past is something that people are going to look at. And then what's the end game or the exit plan? Like, what are you building towards? And how clearly can you communicate that to somebody to say, hey, come hitch your wagon to this train, because this is where we're going, not just in terms of our infinite game and the impact we're trying to have in the world, but also in a foreseeable timeline, this is what we think can actually happen, right? And how it can play out. So those are some of the variables that are going to determine the trueness of my opinion, which is that you should prioritize bringing in external talent over developing internal talent. Again, just as a bias, not as an absolute, not as a black or white, not as an every time or a one size fits all approach, but those are variables that are going to impact your ability to sort of favor that bias and to be successful with it. Now, the reasons why you want to bring in outside talent, they're probably pretty obvious, but if you think about, like, for example, we brought somebody in who used to work at Apple. Apple is a notoriously intense and competitive culture. So like, these people have proven a certain amount of toughness simply because they survived and succeeded at other companies like that. They've also, again, I'll just stick with the Apple example, although it's true at all these other organizations that we brought people in from, they invest millions or oftentimes billions of dollars in training their people. They're making these really large long-term investments in developing great people, and you basically get the benefit of that. that. You get to receive the benefit of, let's say, use the term Apple. Let's say even just on like a unit basis that person received $250,000 in training from Apple in 3 or 4 years. Let's just say hypothetically, that would probably cost us $500,000 to do that same amount of training and professional development with that person. And we just get the benefit of all that as they come from outside. And with that, they're going to bring institutional knowledge of how these larger organizations, how they're able to execute. For example, one of the guys that has come into our organization in the last year did time at multiple larger organizations, one of which was LinkedIn. I guess in their first full quarter, when we were doing quarterly planning, or we call it quarterly sprint planning, they were like, well, this is how LinkedIn does it. Would you guys like to see and learn? And we're like, oh my gosh, of course. That's like invaluable knowledge that I can say within a week, we were a better, smarter, stronger, faster, more precise organization because of institutional knowledge that they brought with them. That wasn't necessarily training and development dollars that company invested in them. It was just simple osmosis from being in proximity to how that company did stuff. And now it shapes how we do our stuff. And then finally, maybe the most important reason why you should bring in outside talent is because it actually impacts your culture. It changes you to be more performance driven, pushes you in the direction of meritocracy. It reduces entitlement where you don't have people saying, well, I've been here, so I deserve that role. Well, it's like if you're all on board with the mission and you're all trying to build and grow in the same direction, then everybody should be aligned around wanting the best person in that role, not just wanting themselves in that role. And that doesn't mean that they may not be the best person, but it helps foster an environment of fair, merit-based competition, makes people want to grow and develop to be as good, or God willing, even better than the people that are coming in from outside organizations, right? And I have seen this at Entra where somebody comes into a role, it's an outside hire, and they bring institutional knowledge and they bring training and they bring soft skills and they bring toughness that was developed over years at another organization. And suddenly everybody in proximity to them goes, oh, there's a new standard. That's what success looks like. Now I'm going to push myself to get better so that next time I get the call, right? And that's the kind of culture that you want in the modern world. Now, let me share with you some of the key things to being able to actually hire that type of talent that is what I call better faster. And it's not to say, oh, well, somebody from the outside is going to be better than somebody from the inside. It's going to be somebody from the outside is already better than somebody from the inside is currently. And maybe in 2 more years, the person internally could be as good as or even better than the person externally, but bring in the external person and they're better faster. They're like better now. It increases the speed at which you can consistently level up as an organization because you're constantly bringing in new influences that there's a yin and a yang to it. Obviously, they have to assimilate. They have to be indoctrinated. They have to be incorporated into your culture. For now, I'm just saying that like your organization as a whole is going to level up. The more outside people are coming in and challenging internal people to get better faster because they were already better. How do you pull this off? First of all, as a CEO or a founder or a leader of an organization, you may be the one doing those interviews, or you may have a recruiter, you may have an HR leader. Who you have having those initial conversations as they're out there scouting in the market makes a huge difference. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. So that's one of the roles you want to invest significantly in, is really, really having a lot of confidence in the person that's out there introducing your opportunity to prospective talent. But then for you as the leader of the organization, you have to really, really care about learning how to be a great business builder and be a great business leader. A lot of creators of businesses are subject matter experts in their particular product or service, and they've invested a lot in developing the skills that power their product or service. But to value the skills of building a business itself as of equal value to whatever skills feed into the product or service excellence, again, outside talent that's looking for a new place to call home, they are going to really, really appreciate that you as the leader of the organization are really committed to developing your skills in the area of business building, and thus will really value whatever they bring to the table that can help you do that. And there's a certain language that you learn to speak in a certain way of talking about business that is totally separate from the way you talk about your product or service. So you got to truly become a student of the game of building businesses. You know, I've talked about culture. You've just got to insist upon a performance culture. And this can be a really difficult thing in young companies because a lot of young companies are, maybe they're started with friends or family, or there's just a lot of camaraderie that builds because it's an early small team that's kind of like the little engine that could. It's us versus the world, right? right? The dark side of that can start to be some entitlement. Hey, we're friends, so I should get the nod over X person. So you've got to be really, really adamant and insistent about creating a performance culture early on, because that's the only way that people from larger organizations, if they're successful, they're very likely performance cultures. That's the only way they're going to be drawn in and excited about what you have to offer. Performance at what, right? I love the quote that a fish will be forever found wanting if it is judged on its ability to climb a tree, right? So it's like performance at what? If something's not suited for the way performance is measured, then it's going to receive a low evaluation of performance. So in a worthwhile business, a business that actually warrants existence, it's going to be the mission. The mission, and whatever the mission calls for within the role, whatever allows the company to advance the mission, that's going to be the basis for performance within a given role. And so actually being a mission-led company, otherwise performance purely comes down to who makes us the most money. And then that will create a toxic mercenary culture that is not the kind of performance culture that you're looking for. And then going with the statement that you need to really be, as the leader of an organization, really truly be a student of the game of building businesses, really being able to speak about and articulate and understand your company operating system. Every company has an operating system, even if they haven't defined it, then they just have one that's the default of how people do the work. But actually having a company operating system, there's a lot of great ones for smaller businesses. EOS, eMyth, 40X, 6 Disciplines is a popular one. At Entre, we've actually adapted a couple different ones. Anyway, we sort of fused the best of a few of them together that we truly tried. We tried implementing them, learned what worked, learned what didn't. We've been doing this for about 5 years, and we ultimately created our own. We have been really intentional and are pretty learned at this point when it comes to our company operating system. So I can get on a call with somebody that comes from 50,000 person organization and have an intellectual parity when they talk about how they're used to doing business and we talk about how we do business. It doesn't sound like we're just making it up as we go, because we actually have a company operating system. We have SOPs within that. If you're a smaller or younger company, not being too rigid about it, where as people come in, they feel like they actually have the ability to impact how the work gets done, and that part of their appeal to you is the value that you place on what they know about how work gets done at larger or further along organizations, that you're going to allow them to come in and impact your company operating system. But you have to have one, and you have to be able to talk about it in concrete terms for anybody to feel like they can come in and impact it, and it's not just going to be chaos. One of my favorite quotes: for the first 25 years of my life, all I wanted was freedom. For the next 25 years of my life, all I wanted was order. For the next 25 years, I realized that order is freedom. And that's why you have to have a company operating system. People within that are free to do their best work, and people will be drawn to that environment. Jocko Willink says, discipline is freedom. In business terms, I would agree, order is freedom. The way you create order is by having a clearly defined operating system. That's a huge part of what's going to draw people in. The next thing I'll say is, why would somebody leave a larger, more established, more secure organization to take a bet on a smaller one? Human beings were naturally self-interested, right? What's in it for me? It's going to be because there's more opportunity to create upside or create value that can be multiplied exponentially in a smaller organization. If you get hired at Amazon, what are the odds that your personal contribution could double the value of Amazon in the next 5 years? And especially, what sort of long-term incentive are you going to have? How are you yoked into that upside or that growth? And when you're a smaller organization, a huge part of your pitch is, hey, come here, create a lot of value, help us grow, and you can participate in the upside of that value, especially if you have some sort of a clear end game. And it doesn't mean your only end game option is to sell your company, but have you considered various types of liquidity events, or have you considered, stock options that come with profit sharing or other types of distributions? Like, how do you offer somebody the opportunity to step into a larger role in a smaller organization where they can create more clearly defined value and participate in the upside as the company grows? The next key is you have to create the understanding before you go out to the market and bring in great talent. You have to create the understanding with your existing team, however big or small, that company growth does not equal promotions for legacy people. You have to create a culture and an understanding that there will always be true fair market competition for open roles, meaning both internal parties that want to apply and external parties that want to apply are going to have to compete on their merits, not based on their legacy, not based on their historical contributions, not based on their entitlement because of what they've done prior. Now, if what they've done prior has resulted in a lot of really valuable institutional knowledge and a lot of cachet or a leadership within the organization, they have a lot of respect, a lot of buy-in, people really respect them as a leader, and they say, oh, that person's been here. Now, that's a quantitative factor that you would certainly evaluate objectively in a healthy competition for a role. but it's not entitlement, right? It's still always based on definable merit, but you have to be installing that understanding very early in an organization, because otherwise people will naturally assume that as the organization grows, it's going to pull them up and you're going to be backfilling underneath, when in reality, probably the best thing you can do as an organization grows is continue to look forward and say, okay, well, we've grown this much, but we want to continue to grow to this point. So let's go find people that have done this type of role in that type of organization, the organization that we're wanting to become, because we're going to be more like that type of organization if we're bringing in people that have done this role in that type of organization. Then you have people that are like, why didn't I get promoted? And so they have to have that understanding beforehand. Otherwise, they're going to be pissed off. They can sabotage you. Enrollment can decrease. And so one of the key ways that you do this is you develop a compensation philosophy that compensation structure doesn't always strictly correlate to level, meaning what you get paid doesn't necessarily depend on what level in the organization you're at. Because one of the biggest places that organizations break down as they start to grow is when you have individual contributors, somebody that's a technician or a task specialist, and that as the organization grows, they assume that because they're the strongest individual contributor, that they should naturally become the manager or the leader of that. Now, a lot of times, the reason they assume that or the reason they desire that isn't because they actually want more responsibility. It isn't because they think that they're actually better suited for a leadership skill set versus an individual contributor or a task specialist skill set. It's because they want the raise. They want the money that they think comes with more responsibility or leadership. But just because somebody's a great software developer or a great engineer doesn't mean that they're going to naturally be a great leader of developers. Plus, if you do promote them to leader, you actually lose their developer horsepower. Now your engineering team just lost an A player because you put somebody in a role where they may not still be an A player, because just because they were a great developer doesn't mean they were a great manager. You have to make sure that people aren't wanting promotions just because they think it's the only way to get a raise. If you have amazing individual contributors and part of your operating system is to periodically evaluate them, why can't an individual contributor actually earn more than their manager if they're in the role that they're best suited for and they're most valuable for? And so you have to create this association in people's minds that my pay is going to be based on the value that I'm bringing in the role that I'm in, and my career trajectory is based on a desire to get into the role where I am best suited, not get into the role where I think I can make the most money. People understand that there's a fundamental value on different types of skills. You just got to make sure that they aren't constantly trying to move up into higher and higher roles because they think it's the only way they can get a raise. But again, that requires that you create a culture where leaders also understand that sometimes they might be leading people who get paid more than them. Basically, people just have to sort of buy into that it truly is about what's best for the organization, not what's best for me. But you have to give them clear guidelines and clear rules of engagement about how to still maximize the opportunity for them in a way that aligns with maximizing the mission of the company. That's it. That's my statement. I will generally sum up my philosophical bias by saying hiring beats internal development, but it only does so if you construct your organization intentionally from the get-go to make it possible. If you don't have the right culture, if you don't have the right compensation philosophy, if you don't have the right operating system, and you don't have the right mission, and you don't have the right financial performance to be able to afford the best talent, then you're going to have difficulty executing on that position. But if those are the case, it doesn't mean, oh, well, that doesn't just work for me. I'll just focus more on developing people internally, which you should always be doing that too, right? But as a company, if you are struggling to operationalize a preference for bringing in great external talent, that doesn't mean scrap that principle and just default to, oh, I'll just promote the people I have. That's a sign that you have systemic problems in your organization. And if you're dealing with those things, don't change the philosophy. Take the signal and actually address the problems. It's never too early to make this decision and start to build with this in mind. It's like lawyers. It's a lot easier to bring lawyers in before you do a deal than after the deal when things have gone wrong. Ditto here. It is a lot easier to create this understanding, buy into this philosophy, and build the culture accordingly earlier in an organization's growth so that every time a new role opens up and somebody doesn't get promoted, you aren't creating resentment and toxicity in the organization. All right? If you're seeing this on YouTube, give me a like. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. This is the type of value that I'm committed to giving away for free. I'm not selling anything here. And if you're on the podcast, hey, what can I say? Reviews, positive reviews are like the single best thing that we can do to help grow the show. So thank you in any case. Hey, if you liked this video, then you're gonna love this video. Instead of focusing on the thing that you're going after, focus on becoming the person for whom that simply becomes a natural outcome, a natural consequence. It's about being the person, not obsessing on the result.